citizen now, and I saw you back there working on your statement, so it may just be an oversight that you did not draw attention to the February 23rd, 1998 press conference that Osama bin Laden held in Khost, Afghanistan, and that he with a satellite telephone delivered to an Arabic-speaking newspaper in London. This seems, as I read it, it reads like a declaration of war, and I wonder if that's just an oversight or whether or not you don't believe that that's an important
Senator Kerry, I've watched prior testimony yesterday, and your statements to that on this subject. I believe we were at war with Al Qaeda. Number one, the president sounded the alarm. I have just something for the record here.
But just help me.
Let me answer.
No, actually, before you do that, because I get 5 minutes here, and I know where you're going, and I just, do you regard the 23rd? Do you regard the 23rd February '98 declaration as a strategically important?
Absolutely, the fatwas were terribly important. The document I wanted to show you. This is. It's not like we weren't talking about the terrorism, the Taliban, Afghanistan. We sounded the alarm. Number two, we used all the instruments that we had available to us, whether those were military or covert or otherwise. I think we.
Counterterrorism was not a top intelligence priority in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War. Former National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft testified that the first Bush administration focused primarily on the former Soviet Union. Moreover, the sense of immediacy diminished because the incidence and severity of terrorism has declined since the Reagan administration. Mr. Scowcroft noted that the focus of discussions on terrorism was state-sponsored attacks from which the U.S. homeland was thought to be immune. As a result, neither the first Bush administration nor the intelligence community devoted considerable attention to terrorism at the time. Former National Coordinator for Counterterrorism Richard Clarke noted that the first Bush administration approved only one narrow document related to terrorism, suggesting that the subject was not a high priority. Thus, as former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger testified, quote, when President Clinton began his first term in 1993, the intelligence community was primarily focused on the agenda created by the Soviet Union's collapse, the Cold War's end, and our Gulf War victory. The CIA maintained no significant assets in Afghanistan after our withdrawal from the region in 1989. Little was known about Osama bin Laden, except that he was one of many financiers of terrorist groups, end quote. Mr. Clarke has testified that when the Clinton administration came into office, furthest thing from its mind in terms of the policy agenda was terrorism. This quickly ended when Mr. Mir Emil Karnassi's murder of two CIA employees outside agency headquarters shortly after Clinton's inauguration. That event, plus the Iraqi attempt to assassinate former President Bush in 1993, and the February 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, capitulated terrorism into the administration's agendas, according to Mr. Berger. He also noted that these events led to the president becoming personally focused on terrorism. The Clinton administration issued several documents that many witnesses saw as reflecting the growing importance of terrorism. 1. In 1995, the Clinton administration issued Presidential Directive PDD 35, which former National Security Advisor Anthony Lake described as formally establishing our top intelligence priorities and placing terrorism among them, led only by intelligence support for our troops in the field and a small number of states that posed an immediate or potential serious threat to the United States. 2. Several months later in 1995, the president issued Presidential Daily Directive 39, the first PDD issued explicitly on terrorism since the Reagan administration. Mr. Lake noted that PDD 39 mandated increased efforts to capture terrorists abroad, high priority for detecting, and preventing attacks with weapons of mass destruction, and the exchange between the FBI and CIA of high-level anti-terrorism officials. 3. 1998, Presidential Decision Directive 62 and 63 were issued to raise the importance of counterterrorism within the interagency process and to clarify responsibilities for reacting to an attack. According to Mr. Clark, these directives establish an interagency coordination process to include regular meetings to evaluate threats, discuss resources, and treat counterterrorism as a continuous rather than ad hoc concern. Al-Qaeda emerged as a leading adversary during the second term of the Clinton administration. Mr. Berger told the Joint Inquiry that bin Laden was portrayed as a financier as late as 1996, but that U.S. foreknowledge of his activities and concern about his threat the organization posed began to grow rapidly. After the August 1998 attack on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, bin Laden dominated U.S. counterterrorism concerns. Mr. Berger testified. In 1996, he was on the radar screen. In 1998, he was the radar screen. Senior levels and officials met frequently on terrorism in the months before the Millennium celebrations. According to Mr. Berger, there were constant principal meetings and much senior level attention to the risk of an al-Qaeda attack. According to Deputy National Security Advisor Steve Hadley, Mr. Berger and Mr. Clark both emphasized the importance of terrorism during the transition from the Clinton to the Bush administrations.